broadcasting live from a high-rise footbath room. This is Pop Culture Reference, your one-stop reference for all things pop culture. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett Strother.
And I'm your other host, Seamus Connolly. I really do appreciate the pause you put in footbath room for our intro today for our main segment, Monkey Man. We're gonna get into all of the weird footbath of it all very soon. I've been cooking on my thoughts on this one in the week since we've seen this, but I'm very excited to talk about it.
As am I. You can't see this at home, but since Seamus said the word Monkey Man, I've been doing kung fu poses, martial arts poses on the mic.
I've been dressing up in a very sleek suit, very slowly.
Yes, slowly as not to, ruffle the mic or make
exactly.
Noise.
You get it. We're podcasters, Garrett.
We're professionals. Speaking of being professional, no news this week because nothing's happening. So
that's our professional opinion, apparently.
Our professional opinion is nothing. Deadpool never heard of her. That's what I have to say about that.
Oh, we're growing up, Garrett. We're really growing up in front of our own eyes.
Or we're just tired of talking about Ant-Man's helmet in the new trailer.
Oh my God, is that a real thing? Well, guess what?
Maybe.
I don't care, Garrett. I don't care.
But without further ado, we're moving on to our main segment this week, Monkey Man.
For today's main segment, we are going to be talking about Dev Patel's Monkey Man. This has been a pretty weird run up to this one. The runway has been like me hearing about it and not caring at all, then seeing the trailer and getting completely sucked in, and then I don't know. I feel like I was expecting more out of this, but I think there are some interesting highlights. I think the acting was great. I think for a debut for Dev Patel's directing, I think I am still fairly impressed, especially knowing a lot of the restraints they had budget-wise, and considering that this was like made for direct-to-streaming before Jordan Peele got involved and things like that. I still think that there's some very good merit to this directorial debut here.
Last we spoke on the matter, and I don't know if things have changed, we've had a shifting podcast schedule of late. I was in a similar boat to you, but I think I was more lenient with Monkey Man than you were. I am very much on the wavelength of what it's trying to do. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean it all succeeds for me, and in that, it is Dev Patel's first film, and I really admired the swings that he's taking. I am allowing it to wash over me. That being said, I think even considering something like budgetary constraints, you look at, like, the Raid movies, which were definitely done on a smaller budget than this, and I think the action is a lot clearer in those films, So that's not to say that all of its problems stem from studio interference or budgetary constraints, although those are certainly factors. I totally echo what you were saying about the acting. I think the ideas behind the action are really strong. I leaned over to you about 15 minutes into this movie, and I was like, has there been a wide shot in this yet?
And then we wondered about that for a while longer, I think,
yeah.
before anything happened.
So I have some problems with the way it was shot. I do think, talking about straight to streaming, that this movie is strangely dim. I will cut it some slack based on the fact that it is set mostly at night in, alleyways and nightclubs and things. But all the same, the movies that is most transparently influenced by, John Wick, which takes similar settings and is able to really light the heck out of them. And, great looking films that this was clearly inspired by. I wish it had taken a little bit more note on the lighting direction from. I think it was a charming film, but I agree it was a letdown for me overall.
Oh my goodness, yeah, the influences are so very clear in this, and they're not trying to shy away from, showing the tether to those influences, but they make so many promises throughout this film that I was disappointed if they didn't follow through on a couple of key ones. And I feel like almost every single thing that felt important along the entire journey just didn't get any follow through altogether. And then there's some trickery where in the climax we get these moments that are supposed to feel cathartic or satisfying in some way as the viewer, and they just don't at all. And I feel like there was, I don't know, again, great ideas, but just the execution felt like everybody just forgot about them as soon as they got the idea on screen.
I like where its head's at, but I think it's less than the sum of its parts, and I think that its metatext, while certainly worthwhile and something we'll get to not only later on in this segment, but also in our pop culture reference, while well-intentioned, is a little bit inscrutable, especially to Western audiences, which this movie was clearly designed around.
Yeah. I can't wait for the next one. And by next one, I don't mean the sequel, but just whatever is next on Dev Patel's directorial list. Maybe if there's a little bit more of a pointed direction to get a theatrical release right off the bat and a little more support from producers like Jordan Peele beforehand, I feel like that would have really allowed them to flesh this out in a more satisfying way. But as it stands, I kind of feel how streaming this movie is, and I probably won't revisit it unless there is some miracle and there is a sequel. Granted, this has a way higher score, like review-wise, than I thought it would generally have. It's way more it's higher received than I thought it would ever be. So maybe there actually will be some kind of follow-up to this, and if they can maybe clean it up a little bit, I think I would be interested at least to check it out.
I also suspect that this is the kind of movie that will do well on streaming, because it's inaccessible in a way that people are not willing to take risks at the movie theater anymore, but it's got good word of mouth, it has good reviews, it's a genre that does really well on streaming. People like to watch action movies at home on a Friday night. So I know that this, as of like day of recording, I think this just hit digital storefronts. So
yeah, I think so.
It'll be interesting to see once not only is available to rent, but also once it's available on Netflix or wherever else, Hulu, wherever it's going. I guess if it's Universal, then it would probably be hitting Peacock. How it will do on that platform, and I'm hoping that it will do well, because I do still want people to support this kind of filmmaking. Dev Patel is an actor that I really enjoy, and I think that it's clear his directorial instincts are strong. He just needs to hone them and learn a little bit more before his next film, I think, which I'm sure he learned a lot on this. I don't know, we haven't even alluded to the very troubled production that this film went through, ignoring the fact that it was going originally to streaming. So I'm with you there on. I'm definitely seated for the next one, and I'm more patient with this than you are.
Yeah, I would like to be. I feel like I'm giving it a lot of my. I don't know. I'm giving a lot of myself to the idea of like, this film went through so much that it's like the perfect storm of like an up and coming director and actor that I like. The producer saving it from direct to streaming, and somebody that I very much respect in the film industry, and the success that it has gotten through all of that. It's like everything I want for things that often don't get that treatment, like even looked at that point. It's just like lost forever, but I just wish it was better. I just wish it was better. I mean,
I don't disagree. I did have higher hopes for this than I ended up being met with the final product, but still, I like what it was going for enough that I am cutting it some slack.
Well, do you want to dive into what we did and didn't like, spoiler-wise? I feel like this is a weirdly lengthy story. I feel like there's plenty for us to get into here.
I agree with you. Let's call official spoilers for Monkey Man.
Let's talk John Wick, maybe, to start?
Weird name drop when he's getting his gun and he's like, you see John Wick? This is John Wick's gun. You like John Wick's gun? And I want something cleaner and more exact. Something along those lines. I think he said
cleaner and simpler, I believe, were the two things he asked for.
Transparently, in the moment, a thesis statement for what he wanted the film to be.
Yes.
And I think in one regard, you and I have already had this conversation, in one regard, it's succeeding because it's paring away a lot of the lore that John Wick is bogged down in, the secret world of assassins and the table and excommunicado and all of the families, and you have to have your marker and your stamp and your ticket and the marquee and all.
There's so many objects that are like relic treasures in that franchise. It does get a lot for sure, but I don't want to be the guy that's defending the bull crap from the John Wick franchise.
Famously, a thing I have no patience for if you go back and listen to the John Wick episodes of this show.
Oh my god. But I don't know. There was such little of anything in Monkey Man compared to how stupidly intricate they get with. And I mean, detailed is not even the right word because they don't really detail much in John Wick. They just get intricate with how confusing and deep the structure of things are. But Monkey Man feels like he's so removed from something like that. It's almost like he feels like too random of a guy. I don't know. I know it's supposed to be like this regular guy who is pushed to a revenge quest for his family and all of this stuff, but they toe the line between he is a near superhuman John Wick style guy and he is 100% not and getting his ass kicked and is kind of sloppy about things. And I feel like they never really marry those two in a way that feels satisfying to me.
There are definitely some thematic contradictions that are left unresolved by the end of this film. I'll agree with you on that. Like, the whole, he's a great boxer, but he's not as good as he needs to be, and then they do the training montage. It seems like a very simple kind of hero's journey situation that gets muddled in something that I'm shocked we didn't mention pre-spoilers, which is this film's really not great pacing. I think a ton of my problems with this movie, even all of the things that it leaves unresolved, would be lessened if there were better pacing throughout, because this movie is explicitly, just like it calls out its influence from John Wick, it's the Ramayana. And the Monkey Man, the titular Monkey Man, is of course Hanuman from the Ramayana, and he's got to go save the Princess Sita. The escort in this movie is named Sita. Like, it has so many of those same story beats. They literally have a puppet show of the Ramayana, like, in the third act of this movie.
In the massacre flashback, which is just, like, so right on the money. It's crazy.
This is following a familiar archetype, like, probably the most influential story in the history of Hinduism. Things that might seem like plot contrivances or conveniences are, in many cases, I think, directly lifted from that or being covered up with the Ramayana archetype. Not to excuse them, but I do think that's where some of the narrative dissonance that you're picking up on is coming from.
And I was thinking a lot about that walking out of the theater, of like, there probably was plenty in that 2-hour movie that I just culturally was not picking up on, probably. I was maybe going in with my more Western action expectations. But, yeah, I don't know. I think that it really takes a hit when it's so doughy in the middle of this movie, where we're throwing in multiple full-length montages and flashback montages that are shorter, and then also going back and doing a full-length flashback. It seems like they're drawing a lot out of something that could have been a little more condensed to keep things flowing. It feels like it comes to a screeching halt at least twice.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
then doesn't earn the way that they really shut the momentum down. I maybe was a little more into the drumming boxing montage just because that there's like a rhythm that they start to pick up again at that point, but then it doesn't really follow through with any of the elements of the montage that seem like we're supposed to be focusing on as like a focal point of where his new skill is coming from.
Well, there's a moment when we get to the tuk-tuk chase. It's at the end of the first act. The movie says, okay, we're off on our adventure. We have the get in moment, you know.
Yeah.
And we have one of the moments where it finally cuts to a wide shot as the tuk-tuk drifts around a corner in the streets of Mumbai, or not Mumbai. I think this city was set, or this movie was set in a fictional city that's definitely not Mumbai, guys.
Somewhere in Indonesia, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But after that, you're thinking, okay, great, we're off to the races with this action movie, and then it just slows right back down again. You get a couple more action sequences, and then, as much as I agree that I like the boxing montage, all of the fluff around his rebirth into, you know, bleached, white-haired Hanuman Monkey Man takes a really, really long time.
Not to mention, one of my biggest problems with this movie called Monkey Man, and again, maybe I'm expecting too much out of that and I should just sink more into the Hanuman metaphor, but he was bleached white hair Monkey Man for all of 5 seconds until he takes it off before he fights the two goons outside. He should have at least kept it on for that fight, right?
I was picturing that he would get into at least, like, the first mini-boss, like the woman who initially hires him or something. You know, he would get captured and down on his knees, and she would slowly take off the Monkey Man mask and realize who he was. And then he would take everybody out and be without the monkey mask for the rest of the third act. But yeah, he throws it unceremoniously in the gutter with that dog that is in, like, 2 montages and then we never see again.
Yeah, another John Wickism that they're like, look how not John Wick we are, turns into just, like, what feels like wasted time almost. Like, the dog training could have been interesting if the dog stuck around, or if the dog very much didn't stick around and was maybe killed by some bad guys. I don't know, one of the 4 main bad guys that barely get comeuppance.
Well, it was frustrating to me, speaking of the tuk-tuk chase, they introduce his quirky little friend that works
little
with
weird
him,
guy.
Yeah, in the restaurant. And they set up that he has some friction with the woman that is the boss down on the lower level, and he becomes quick friends with Dev Patel's character and has all of his quirks, like his scooter is named Nicki Minaj and all this stuff. They go together, the tuk-tuk chase ends poorly, and then the guy has to go into hiding, and we see him in hiding a couple times. And then, when Monkey Man is reborn, he sees him fight in the boxing match that Monkey Man finally wins. And then that's the end of that character. He doesn't come back and help out. All of the setup with that character, there's no actual payoff, which is very frustrating, I think.
Not to mention our South African fighting ring running guy, whose name I definitely
Charlton Copley.
Charlton Copley of District 9 and A-Team fame.
I was going to say, of Murtaugh in the reboot of the A-Team fame.
Oh, God. Yes, I thought was going to be way more connected with the underworld that was going to have to be taken down. The whole bleeding bonus thing I thought was going to come back with the fight with him. I don't know. He gets like a 3.5 act highlight when he goes back to the fighting arena and then also just never shows up again.
I don't get it. I really wish that I did. Why the third act of this movie just doesn't work, because I think despite the pacing, this movie, I know I already said, I think if the pacing were better, I could have forgiven a lot of the letdowns in the third act, and conversely, I feel like I could have forgiven the pacing if the third act had really come together. But
yeah.
It ultimately feels pretty anticlimactic, despite some decent action in the third act. Again, when it goes to the wide shot of him in silhouette fighting on the bar, when the Hydra, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, the group of third gender fighters that nurse him back to health show up and fight with him in the hotel.
So cool.
Great. All of that stuff is working for me, but it's just not coming together in a way that's inherently satisfying, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of setup with the escort woman who kind of gets a little thumbs up moment when she bashes the lady boss's head in. We don't know what happens to her. We don't know what happens to pretty much anyone towards the end of this movie besides that Monkey Man kills the two equally boring main bad guys in the exact same way, more or less, before this movie wraps up with more cryptic voiceover.
Now, for political reasons, there probably were some cuts made to this movie. I'm not certain about that. They've not explicitly said, like, they shot stuff that didn't make it into the movie to avoid controversy. But I do wonder if some of the characterization of the villains, which we will get more into in our pop culture reference, was obscured to distance this film from real-world events.
And maybe that is the case. Again, my expectations were nothing but of what I thought a good film like this could be. So I know it's weird, and it had all these weird things about it, and changes and shuffle-ups, but I don't know. They pretty much unceremoniously do away with 3 out of the 4 main villains. The boxing ring guy doesn't show up, like I mentioned before. Again, after that, the little weird guy who's connected doesn't show up again pretty much at all. It just seems like they successfully set up all of these interesting connections between these characters and the different levels of this society that he has to kind of weave his way through. And then they like check him off like boxes at the end without actually following through with any of the ideas at first. They were like, okay, we throw a scene to her, we throw a scene to him, maybe he's there, he gets a close up for a second, and then we know he's good, and then we move on.
Yeah, they don't have as much fun with its like raid style working your way up through the building premise of the third act as I was really expecting them to. I mean, you have fun moments like in the elevator with him having to use his teeth to push the knife into the guy's throat, but those moments are unfortunately few and far between, and I just don't think that the action is as compelling as I wanted it to be, despite moments of greatness. Again, this has a lot to do, I think, with a lot of the film being really dim, a lot of the characters being dressed similarly, and pull the camera back, for goodness sake.
Oh, that is, I think, is, that's, I think, gonna hopefully be a lesson learned for the next go-around. The GoPro and the iPhone, very impressive that you can, shoot pretty solid-looking stuff on that. Get a bigger thing for a good amount of the action. We need to see what's happening, please and thank you.
I'm assuming that was, like, the stuff where it's point of view of him fighting for, a couple seconds or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just don't think that the choreography's great, and I wish I could see it. That's my big takeaway. Yeah.
I mean, we get a pretty damn solid bathroom fight that is like well lit, and there are shots that we can actually kind of see a little bit more.
Straight out of Mission Impossible Fallout.
And maybe that is our own dumb Mission Impossible brains going like, oh, this reminds me of that thing. But it was honestly one of the better fight sequences in this movie, even though it ends kind of weird. But
which is also straight into the tuk-tuk chase. So like,
yeah, that's true. So like, we really do kind of. That was when I really thought we were ramping up there, and it seems like the flow. I mean, we talked about it. The flow just screeches to a halt just after that. And I don't know, the idea of like they're setting up all the bleach powder stuff. He calls himself Bobby for Bobby's bleach powder, and then he makes him snort the bleach and all that. And I was like, oh, this is gonna kill this guy.
They set up the bleach powder for him to bleach the monkey mask.
And then he totally uses that all along, right?
That does get paid off. That I feel like that's actually one of the few things that does work. Again, I wish the bleaching of the monkey mask resonated for longer, but
yeah, they almost paid it off, I would say. I would say that they knew exactly what to do to pay it off, and then they abandoned it for some reason.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's a tricky film.
It's a tricky film.
Beyond we're not even into the politics of it yet, because that is something that we're saving for our reference segment, where we're, this is the more how we felt about the film part of the show, and that's a more analytical perspective. Not to say that we are not thinking analytically, obviously, right now, but I wish that, it's hard to meet the film on those terms when so much of it is muddled before you can even get to that point.
Yeah, there's so much bad. Like, I was like, by the time we're getting to the cool stuff in the later part of this movie, I was like I'm kind of done with this movie. And that's a bad attitude to have before a movie's over. And many movies have actually surprised me with their ending when I've kind of had a little bit more of that attitude. But the baggage is undeniable with how little we get to resolve by the time we wrap up. And again, John Wick style, he wakes up on the same night that he was supposedly killed for the start of the second movie, and he's got to work his way down the thing. It sucks that my mind keeps going back to, if it were more like all of the things that it promised us it wouldn't be, it would be a better movie. And that is, I feel kind of slimy saying that. That's like my own Hollywood franchise brain, but there's too many half measures in this.
I agree. I think there's really good promise in a lot of the work that goes in here, but it just doesn't deliver what I wanted it to. I wish I were here saying we have another action movie to champion the same way that we have much stupider films than this. I admire how smart this movie is in so many ways, and it just isn't able to check the base boxes for me.
Yeah. Unfortunate. And again, maybe we are spoiled with our beekeepers and our
high arts.
How crazy is it that I'm ready to rewatch The Beekeeper and I'm like, Monkey Man, I'm good.
How crazy is it that really, if you want to get into it, Seamus, The Beekeeper is a very apt American equivalent of Monkey Man. The way it's talking about American politics and the way that is tied to other ongoing controversies and corruption within the political and financial system under which we operate, and the fact that it's re-weaponizing, in some cases not altogether successfully, the problems that we have with that hierarchy against itself. Like, there's a lot. I hate to say this out loud, because it sounds really condescending and like I'm doing Dev Patel a little dirty. Monkey Man could learn some things from The Beekeeper. I'll say that.
I don't disagree with you, is all I'm saying. And you know what's the even stupider thing? There's just a little sprinkle of John Wick bullcrap in The Beekeeper, and that the stupid organization.
I said on the pod that's the perfect amount of John Wick stupid stuff.
And if, I think, and again, the tone of Monkey Man is so specifically way more serious than anything else, and I admire that as well. There's no, like, it is actually about something, and not just someone killed John Wick's dog. Someone killed Jason Statham's old lady.
Exactly.
It's like about a real, and like, again, I don't know. I feel like we keep saying things and then going, but then again, I said before, there are other things.
It's a hard movie to grapple with.
It really is.
I guess I'll sum up with this. The fact that this movie is choosing to, instead of pursuing dumb fictional John Wick lore, incorporating cultural elements of India that are inherently political and tie in with the central themes of the conflicts of the film that are motivating our main character and are frankly extremely controversial in the country of India, to the point that this might not be able to release there, even heavily censored, is a good choice. And I'm going to stand by that despite all of my issues with the actual filmmaking going on. I think that the heart of Monkey Man is in the right place, and we will further discuss that in our pop culture reference.
Yes, definitely agree. Ultimately, I would rather have Monkey Man exist as it is than get my stupid action movie fix and it be, like I was saying it might be. I'm glad it exists in the form it does, and I look forward to more from Dev Patel.
An imperfect movie does not mean that it's not without merit.
Yeah, I've seen far worse movies for this podcast. I will say that.
Yeah.
This does not even touch some of the garbage we've talked about.
And I think part of the reason we're being so hard on this when we're also like, Meg 2, The Trench!
Oh, yeah.
Is that this is so close to being something like transcendent.
Yes. Yeah. I said it on our last episode that I was ready to stop calling things John Wick clones and start calling them Monkey Man clones. Like, I was ready for it to join the pantheon of fast hands and stuff, I
think this is better than most of the John Wick movies.
Now that's interesting. That is interesting. How many John Wicks are above Monkey Man?
I'm gonna say
2, maybe?
I'm gonna say
1
2.
and 4?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
Three on a good day maybe could be above it, but I'm gonna say that it is better than 2 of the 4 John Wick movies.
Agreed. But what do you say we move on to our pop culture reference this week?
Let's do it. For today's pop culture reference, we're going to be talking about the politics of Monkey Man. This week's main segment, Monkey Man, grapples explicitly with many ongoing conflicts and controversies across the Indian political landscape. Monkey Man's central plot revolves around combating the right-wing ideology known as Hindutva, a movement supporting Hindu nationalism and the suppression of religious minorities. Originally, scenes featuring the villains, a right-wing politician and a fundamentalist militia leader, included flags and other signage that were the color saffron. Saffron is the color primarily associated with the Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, one of the 2 major Indian political parties and a right-wing party whose policies promote Hindutva. In light of backlash to some of these shots being featured in the trailer, the signs and flags were digitally altered in additional trailers in the final film to be red instead of saffron. However, the saffron clothing worn by most of the characters in these scenes remains unchanged.
Dev Patel's character, the titular Monkey Man, is derived from the Hindu deity Hanuman, with critical consensus interpreting the film as an attempt to reclaim Hinduism and its imagery from the wave of right-wing Hindu nationalism. While clearly well-intentioned, the film has been criticized by some for violently weaponizing Hindu imagery in a way not dissimilar to the Hindutva movement, therefore undermining its central themes. Much of the research for today's reference was pulled from the article in Time written by Siddharth Adlakha, a critic whose work we have previously referenced when discussing Orientalism in the movie The Creator. For additional education, we encourage you to check out his article as well as the other Monkey Man literature written by informed critics.
I don't have a ton to say about this beyond what we've already said in our reference and back in the main segment, but I do think it's really admirable of Dev Patel to not only take such a big swing with his directorial debut, but to also make it about something that is so clearly important to him and such a controversial topic to try to tackle in a movie like this. Not to mention the fact that only a couple weeks after this movie released featuring a fictional Indian election, the real Indian election took place in in real life.
Yeah, I can imagine that would stir up a lot of angry feelings, perhaps. But I think a lot like we were saying all throughout our main segment, the admiration we have for making this still like an action movie with a story, but like making it about something and not just another faceless mercenary organization, assassin league, whatever mysterious blah blah blah. It seems fairly even with the changes they made to some of the more specific color schemes. I think it's very brave for that to be the directorial debut that we have. And I hope we see more, maybe even more direct reference to things like this, because obviously, there's a lot to say in the political messaging of what the main character is trying to do from start to finish.
Also, slightly off topic, I know we only end up bringing him up on the show whenever we're, like, trying to find another source to talk about something that's, like, important or controversial, but in general, Siddhanta Laka is, I think, a brilliant film critic, regardless of the type of film he's writing about, that, while I may not always agree with him on film, writes really interestingly and articulately, and engages from a very good-natured place with all of the media that he writes about. So, if you're going to read his Monkey Man piece, I highly recommend it, but in general, I think he's a great critic to check out.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
But why don't we go ahead and, speaking of recommendations, save the rec center.
Let's do it.
Save the rec center!
Now it's time to save the rec center, where we give you our weekly recommendations. What do you got for me, Garrett?
Seamus, here on Pop Culture Reference, we like to tackle the hard pop culture questions that other podcasts are just not willing to pose. And the one that I am here in the rec center to present you with today is, Jeremy Renner, Jason Bourne movie good?
Listen, I've been saying this for years, my friend. You see the light. And I had this opinion pre Ghost Protocol too. I did not even know anything of that world and him, but I definitely agree.
I have been making my way back through the Bourne movies. I had not seen the first three in the better part of a decade, and I'm not really sure what exactly possessed me. Maybe it's that I've been in an espionage mood of late. Maybe it was going on the Bourne Stuntacular at Universal Studios back in October. I was like, I can revisit the Bourne movies, and then, why not keep the party rolling with the two I've not seen? So last night I popped on the Bourne Legacy, really with rock bottom expectations, and was pleasantly surprised that it's overall a pretty decent action thriller. It bears very little resemblance to the first three Bourne movies. a shockingly little resemblance, in fact. I think that's kind of a feature, though, and not a bug, because if it were closer to being a Bourne movie, I think its shortcomings would be more evident, including the fact that it does not have a third act, and a lot of its, like, MacGuffin-y lore-building stuff I don't really care about, but Renner is a good actor and doing something that's very, very different from what Matt Damon is doing in those first three. It has a lot of actors who I had no idea were going to be in it. I will not spoil for the folks at home, because every time they'd introduce a new character, I'd be like, they're in this? And that was a very pleasant surprise. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I am sure we will never see Aaron Cross again.
Don't you say that, Garrett. Don't you say that to me.
Maybe in 10 years we're gonna get a Triple X Return to Xander Cage situation where we team up the two Bourne guys, but I'm not holding my breath.
Listen, the Bourne Legacy is the State of the Union of this franchise, and guess who shows up in the third Xander Cage movie? Garrett.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I'm saying
like, that's
there, but like imminently. I think there is a world. If there's a world where Jeremy Renner got the opportunity and then snubbed for two different high-profile protagonist roles in established espionage franchises, there's a world where he comes back to both of those franchises that he's been missing from for a long time and absolutely stealing the show.
Well, I mean, I hope he comes back to Mission Impossible more than I hope he comes back to Bourne.
You don't want to see him and Jason team up together? You don't like Treadstone? I don't like Treadstone. No way.
As much as I enjoyed the Bourne legacy, I absolutely believe that Jason Bourne would kill Aaron Cross in about 10 seconds flat.
It's not Cross v. Bourne. We're not Dawn of Justicing it. They're going to team up.
They're going to team up. There's no fighting to begin with. It's just a straight team up.
They are boyfriends with each other, and they have been in hiding, and they're going to fight against Blackstone, Treadstone,
or Blackbriar. Or whatever the one in the Jeremy Renner one that I just watched last night is called that I don't... The Outfit, maybe? But that's not right.
The High Table, Garrett. The High Table.
Excommunicado. Jason Bourne is excommunicado.
He really is for almost every single one of those, isn't he?
It's true. Anyway, the Bourne legacy, shockingly, a very enjoyable time. I'm not expecting me to come back next week and do the same with Jason Bourne, but who knows?
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm going to have to revisit it finally myself after caping for it for so long.
But what do you have to save the rec center, Seamus?
I had the absolutely lovely experience of playing and platinuming the PS5 launch game Bugsnax. Garrett, have you played Bugsnax?
It's been downloaded on my PS5 since, December 2020, but no, I've not touched Bugsnax. I can sing the little song. I can sing the Bugsnax stuff. And it's like your hand is an apple or something. I don't know.
Yes. I had very wrongfully assumed that Bugsnax was some sort of knack Little Big Planet knockoff thing. I didn't realize it was like a first-person Pokemon Snap style adventure that I was going on. It is entirely charming. The writing is actually very funny. You're not a person, you're a Grumpus. You're basically just like a race of Muppet people that slowly
turn into food, and then it's a body horror Cronenberg movie where you eat yourself.
Oh God, I wish that it took that, and it does take a weirdly dark angle of things after a while, but I wish it got that dark. I really do. But it's, you find a bunger that's crawling around, or a Dacky, which is like a daiquiri. It's like tricky little Pokemon guys, and you catch them in little goofy ways. There's the Southwest hot sauce region, and there's the mountaintop with all the ice cream stuff on it. It's just like a charming, fun little thing that I completely overlooked. It's short, very fun. If you already have it downloaded for some reason, I would say give it a shot if you have space on your game card for a couple days, because man, did I just get absolutely sucked into it. It was also recommended to me that my coworker Marco was nearly begging me on his knees to give it a shot, and I was like, yeah, fine, I'll give it a shot. And I played it, and I just lost myself in it. I thought it was lovely.
I have heard nothing but great things about Bugsnax. If I'm being honest, you are not the first person to tell me I should play it, so I will probably take a jaunt over to whatever the land where the Bugsnax come from is called at some point in the relatively near future. If I would love to get a running, somebody in the comments tell us what the running total of the games that I've said I've played on the show, or
and then also a running total of how many times I've rec centered a video game is probably a pretty similar number, I would imagine.
Yeah, just sometimes I'm like, that doesn't sound like it's for me, Seamus, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Well, I'm glad that you are gonna maybe give this one a shot. I truly thought it was like a meme thing, like any other game that people won't stop telling me to play, but it really isn't. It's really just lovely. But I think that wraps us up for the show this week. If you want to reach us on social media, that's at @PCR_podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and reach us directly by emailing popculturreferencepod@gmail.com.
Well, everybody, I'm looking forward to next week on Pop Culture Reference.
Adios, amigos.